SoftSmart Microsoft Series Virtualization Conference Call. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Mr. Jim Nagurney. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, thanks, Nancy. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is the latest in our Analytics Advantage Best Practices series. Today we're going to be talking about your virtual server environment. And specifically, we're going to be talking about licensing optimization. So we're going to deal first mainly with Windows servers, and then we're going to dive into some other technology that's centered around virtualization there. My name is Jim Nagurney. I am one of the senior members of our Analytics Advantage group here. So just to give you a little background on me, I've been here at SoftSmart for about, 11 years now. And I'm a licensed analyst. So all I do is analyze Microsoft licensing all day long, every day. That's my existence. So let's dive right in. First of all, there's my little boy Alex, the cutest kid in the world. Let's go over the agenda first. What I'd like to do, first things first, is I want to recap from our last webinar. So last time we talked about understanding your licensing position. So I'm just going to recap and give you a little bit of summary on what we talked about last time. And so this will be a refresher for those of you that were on last time. And if you weren't, hopefully this will pique your interest enough, and you can feel free to contact us. We can talk a little bit more about it. Secondly, we're going to dive into our licensing optimization for a virtual server environment. Okay. So we'll first talk about why is it important, right? Why should you care about optimizing your licensing? You may be under the impression that, hey, you know what, our licensing is great right now. We have a good handle on it. Why is it important to take a second look at that? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to get into the real nuts and bolts. First we're going to talk about the three basic principles surrounding server virtualization with Windows Server licensing. And then we're going to talk about the process, right? This is a process by which you can determine what is the optimal licensing configuration for your data center. Okay? So there is a process to getting there, and we'll go over that. That will be the bulk of our presentation. Then we're going to talk a little bit about HyperV, which is Microsoft's hypervisor. And then finally, we'll talk about managing your virtual environment. So what are the tools out there that can help you manage those virtual servers and also your physical servers as well? Right? And so we'll be talking specifically about the System Center products. And just a note about this, I wanted to approach this from kind of a different perspective. I'm not going to really do a deep dive into these products and tell you how great and rich the feature sets are. I wanted to sort of demystify the System Center products a little bit, because what I notice in talking to a lot of customers, and we do talk to a lot of customers every day, is that there's a lot of confusion about System Center products. So we're going to try to differentiate between SCOM and SCCM and Virtual Machine Manager and things like that, just so you have a really good understanding of what each of those products are. Okay. And last but not least, we will hopefully take some of your questions. We would ask that general questions are better if you have really specific questions, and if you would like to do a deep dive into your specific virtual environment and what's the best way for you to license those servers rather, then I would suggest contact your SoftSmart account manager, or you can contact us, myself or Jack, or anyone here on the analytics team, and we can do that deep dive. Okay? So let's begin. First thing that I would like to talk about, and any of you who've been on any of these webinars in the past know that I always start with the three pillars. You guys are probably bored sick with these, but I'm going to go through them one more time. This is what we feel every customer needs to do, and needs to do well, to be in a position to optimize their Microsoft licensing, and to make sure that they're not overspending on licensing and wasting money, or underspending on licensing, and potentially opening themselves up to compliance risks. So in our last webinar, we were right about here, right? We were talking about understanding your licensing position. We talked about, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but entitlements versus usage and that sort of thing, and what it means to have a strong licensing position versus a weak licensing position. today we're going to be a little bit more in pillar number 2, making a sound investment, or licensing the right way. Right? Every network is a little bit different, right? So the licensing configuration, the licensing models that you use are going to be different from customer to customer, we find, right? There's no magic bullet for this. There are processes and methodologies and tools and that type of thing, but there's no real, one-size-fits-all here. So everything that we're going to talk about really fits into here. And then lastly, of course, managing your investment, which is also very important. We're not going to touch on that today, but getting value out of your investment is an important part of your Microsoft licensing optimization. Okay, so last time we talked about licensing position. What do we mean by licensing position? We're talking about your licensing, the actual licensing that you own, your licensing entitlements versus your specific deployment. How do they match up? Right? You own more licenses than are actually deployed. You own fewer licenses than you need and need to purchase more. Right? So the functional state of your software licensing reconciled with the specific deployment of the licensed software. And functional in this case means that when we're talking about licensing position, this is going to give us actionable data, actionable intelligence regarding 2 specific things. Right? And again, we're talking about our licensing position. What can I tell from my licensing position? Well, I'm going to be able to determine my compliance status. Am I over-licensed or under-licensed? And it's going to help me determine how I should make future investments based on my technology goals. Right? And it all comes down to cost savings. Right? Having clarity and control over your investments, and it all really comes back to that cost savings. So we talked last time, and this is just, again, a little bit more recap. We talked about how we talk about deployments, how we map deployments, and measure what's deployed and what's going to be deployed. This is the template that we use. So, for instance, they may be using Office 2003, this customer. Maybe they have plans to go to Office 2010, and that's going to happen in 2012. Right? Maybe they have 650 users of SharePoint, etc. This is how we map out our customers' licensing position. Right? So we match up what they own with what's deployed. And the key to everything, and this is one of the main themes that we go through, pretty much all the time, every single webinar we do, is process. Right? It really helps to have a methodology and a very strict process in place that's going to help you achieve the control that you need over your software assets. So there's certain tools that are available to you today, completely free of charge, right? And again, this is still all recap from last time, but your MLS report, right? This is a report of your every single volume licensing transaction that you've ever done, right? Your SoftMart rep can pull that for you. The roadmap template, which we use here, that's something that I would be happy to share with you. I can email that to any of you guys. And of course, you have other licensing resources here as well, your account manager, your Microsoft specialist, your analytics team, etc. And talk about your process, right? How are we maintaining control over our licensing position? How are we maintaining clarity into where we are and where we need to go? Well, your process should include account reviews with your SoftMart rep. Go through your MLS, check for stray licenses or stray purchases. Have licenses been added since the last time you looked at your MLS, etc. Refresh your technology roadmap at least once a year, right? Taking a look at your technology goals. When would that occur, right? When is Office 2010 deployment going to occur? Maybe that's going to occur next year, right? Maybe that gets pushed, etc. Those are the things you really need to look out for. And of course, communicate all of your technology goals and your financial goals to your software advisor. Right? So it's not just enough to say, here's what we want to deploy. We want UC, and we want storage and fault tolerance and all this other stuff. It's also important to communicate what your financial goals are. We need monthly payments. We're more inclined for CapEx over OpEx or whatever that may be. Right? We want to make sure that you are able to meet your technology goals in a way that is not overburdensome financially, right? And make sure you document everything. Don't forget about software asset management as well. If you really need to get very granular about your compliance software asset management engagement, and Casey talked to you guys about this last time, will tell you exactly where those gaps may be. And if it could be as little as one license, those are the type of gaps that we can detect. And of course, if there's larger gaps and more significant problems, we would be able to detect those as well. If that's something that you think might be helpful to you and might help you achieve those goals of having more control, SAM is something that we can do for you. And finally, remember that you're not in this alone. So your sophomore rep, your Microsoft licensing specialist, analytics associate, we're all here to help you at every step of the way. Okay? So that was last time. Let's jump into what we're here for, which is virtual server environment. Keep in mind that everything that I'm going to present is laid out in a white paper that we have written specifically for this webinar, and that's going to be emailed out to all of the attendees of the webinar. We're not sure if that's automated or manual yet, so it may happen today, it may happen tomorrow, but we will get it to you, I promise. Okay, why is it important to take a look at this? Even those customers, right, we do these discoveries all the time, even those customers who think that they have a good handle on it may need to revisit this issue. Why? A lot of the customers that we are engaging are out of compliance but don't have any idea that they're out of compliance. Okay, so let me give you an example. Right? You may be under the assumption, hey, I have 30 virtual machines, right? They're all standard server, and I have 30 Windows Server standard licenses. You may think, okay, you know what? 30, I'm licensed, I don't have to worry about my compliance. Unfortunately, that's not the case generally speaking. Right? I don't have to tell you guys this, but Microsoft licensing is not necessarily as intuitive as it necessarily could be. Right? There are certain rules that you probably are not aware of that need to be applied really in any case. Right? There's product use rights that's going to give you the licensing rules for all products. But specifically for Windows servers, there's areas where customers do trip up a lot and do tend to slide out of compliance. Secondly, reduced cost. All right, everyone says, oh, we're going to reduce cost. Well, we can say unequivocally that if you have a virtualized environment and you're licensed improperly, then you're overspending, right? Generally speaking, most people are overspending, and if you're not overspending, you're probably underspending, right? Again, it's about finding the optimal licensing structure, whether that's enterprise or data center, and applying all of the licensing rules. And when you apply those rules, typically you end up saving money, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. Okay? And then greater control, right? Who doesn't want control? So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? So I'm going to jump into next the three basic principles with regard to Windows Server licensing. And I'm going to tell you, when we go through the principles and we start applying the principles, this tends to be the quote-unquote light bulb moment, right? So, and I'll show you when typically that happens when we're doing one of these deep dives, okay? But there usually is a moment where customers say, you know what, okay, now I get it, now this makes sense. So I'm hoping that you guys have that same light bulb moment. But let's jump into the three principles. Let's see what happens. Principle number one, okay, very, very important to keep in mind that everything that we're going to talk about today, all of the Windows Server licensing rules as laid out in the 2011 product use rights for Microsoft apply to a virtual environment regardless of what that virtual platform is going to be. So whether you have ESX hosts, whether you have Zen hosts, or you have HyperV, all of these licensing rules are going to apply. And I specifically put this one first because a lot of times when we begin having this conversation, we get the objection, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm using VMware. And our answer is always, well, you know what, it actually really does apply to you, and here's why. So just keep this in mind. And I put an example here, right? 3 ESX hosts with virtual Windows servers on it are going to be licensed exactly the same way as 3 HyperV hosts. Principle number 2. Windows Server licenses are assigned to the physical host and not the virtual machine. And this is an area where, again, it tends to be sort of counterintuitive, right? We're thinking about a virtual environment. We assume that that license is going to be applied to that virtual instance, right, to that operating system environment. But in fact, that's not the case. The Windows Server license itself has to be assigned to the underlying hardware. Okay? Now this is going to become more important when we consider principle number 3, which is that the 90-day rule, okay, quote-unquote, the 90-day rule states that Windows servers may not be reassigned from one physical server to another within 90 days of last reassignment. So what does that mean? That means that when you take a virtual machine, a VM, and you move it from one host to another host, the license does not move with it. It stays with that first physical piece of hardware. Okay? And that tends to be the light bulb moment, to be honest with you. That's when most people say, oh okay, you know what, that's the, and then the wheels start turning and the process starts going in their head. Right? And you start thinking about your own environment, and okay, here's the different ways that I could tweak it. That's typically what we see. Now, we do have a process that we go through with all of our customers to uncover the optimal licensing configuration for any particular environment. Okay? And I'm going to walk through that process with you right now. Oh, yeah. Is there an easy way to apply these principles to environment? Why, yes, Virginia. There is a simple 4-step process to determining the optimal Windows server. Sorry, I forgot I put that animation in there. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like. Is there some latency? Yeah. Here's from a high-level overview. Okay. And we're going to go into detail in this presentation, and then the white paper will go into even more detail. But in a nutshell, here's what you're doing. You're determining your physical environment, or determining your virtual environment. Then you're allocating, you're doing your host guest allocation, so you're determining which host will be on which guest. And then, after we've done that, we determine the optimal licensing configuration. All right, let's walk through it. First of all, your physical environment. Here's the questions that you need to ask. Number 1, how many physical hosts are supporting the cluster? And number 2, how many physical processors are on each host? Now remember, principle number 1, it doesn't matter what your virtualization platform is. You probably should, this is what we do, we sort of just draw a diagram like this. Okay, here's my host. On each of these hosts is a certain amount of processors. Right? In this case, we're using HyperV, but it could be ESX, it could be Zen, or whatever. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is determining your virtual environment. So, question number 1 that you would ask here, how many total virtual operating system environments, or VMs, are managed by these hosts? So we've got lots of virtual servers out there, right? So in this case, and we're gonna follow this case study through to its conclusion. In this case, we've determined that there's 40 total virtual servers on this server cluster, on that 7-server cluster. Okay. The second question is what are the flavor of those servers? So are they standard? Are they enterprise? Are they data center? Well, in this case, we've determined, right, and this is again pretty straightforward stuff, right? We've determined that 30 of those instances are deployed as standard. And we're not talking about licensing here, right? We're talking about the actual software that's deployed. 30 of those server instances are standard, and 10 of those server instances are enterprise. Okay. Question number 3, and this is a very important question, is live migration enabled? And by live migration, we also mean vMotion. Okay, so what we're going to do with that is take a look at it both ways. We're going to take a look at it with vMotion enabled, and we're going to look at it without vMotion enabled, or live migration. But before we get to step 3, so we've covered the first 2 steps, right, physical, virtual. Before we get to step 3, we have this diagram here, right? This is the diagram that we've drawn based on the first 2 steps. Right now we have all of the data that we need to build the right licensing model that's going to support our technology goals. We know we have 7 hosts. We know we have 18 total processors. We know we have 40 virtual operating systems, and we know the breakdown of those operating systems. We know that live migration may or may not be enabled, and we're going to look at, again, we're going to look at that both ways. Okay, this is going to be our diagram. So let's look at it first without live migration. So if you're just, we have, in this case, we have server instances assigned to a physical box, and they don't move around on that physical box. Well, the first thing that we need to do is determine the maximum number of virtual operating systems that are assigned to each of those hosts, including the count and the install type. So we need to determine if it's standard, if it's enterprise, or it's data center. And if you look at our little model here, we're just going to focus in on one host. Okay? So what are we saying here? Well, first of all, we know that there's 7 operating systems operating on this one host. We know the breakdown. Right? There's 4 standard, and there is 3 enterprise. Right now, we need to allocate Windows Server licenses to this host. Right? And we're using, and this kind of goes back to sort of our Windows Server 101, right? These are basic Windows Server licensing rules, but as a refresher, right, Windows Server Standard is going to allow you for 1 virtual machine, right? It's a one-to-one relationship there. And that would only be for a standard instance. Windows Server Enterprise, on the other hand, allows 4 virtual instances. Okay, and those 4 virtual instances can be either standard or enterprise. Okay, and if it's assigned, if a Windows Server Enterprise, just a note about that, if a Windows Server Enterprise is assigned to a box, all 4 of those VMs must be on that one box. They can't be broken out into separate boxes. But you have up to 4. And then Windows Server Data Center is licensed per physical processor, right, not per box, physical processor, and it allows for unlimited virtual machines. And those machines and those operating systems that you deploy may be standard, maybe enterprise, or maybe data center. So when we look at our example over here, right, what we see is that there's basically 3 options. We can assign to this physical box, we can assign 1 enterprise license and 3 standard, right? 4 plus 3 equals 7. 2 enterprise licenses, that would give us up to 8 virtual machines, and those can be either standard or enterprise. Or we can assign 2 data center licenses, 1 for each physical processor. Okay. Again, principle number 2 is going to be applied here. That we're assigning the licenses, whichever option we choose, those licenses are going to be assigned to the physical host, not the individual operating systems that reside on that host. One thing I also want to put a little note in here as well, with regards to cost. The cost of a data center license is about 2% more. It's almost exactly the same price as an enterprise license. So what does that mean? That means that your break-even in a lot of cases is going to be 8 operating systems. So if you think you're ever going to exceed 8 operating systems, data center tends to be a good model for that particular box. It allows you to go above and beyond 8. Okay, but those are your 3 options for that one box. And again, this is without live migration. This is saying here's exactly what operating systems are residing on that one server. So let's look at which is a much more common model, which is with live migration, or vMotion. Okay. What do we need to do? Well, with live migration or vMotion, it's extremely difficult to determine the maximum number of virtual operating systems. You have to think in terms of maximum capacity. Okay? How many virtual machines may reside on any particular host at any particular point in time? A 90-day transfer, the 90-day rule would apply here. And in most cases, this would be too complex for anything but data center licenses, because data center allows you unlimited server instances. So it's going to be impossible to determine what servers are where, when, and to actually keep track of that. Right? Principle number 3 is going to apply here. As I said before, the 90-day rule says that when that virtual machine moves from server A, right, physical host A, to physical host B, that license does not move along with it. So server B must already have the appropriate licensing enough to accommodate that virtual machine, if that makes sense. So in this case here, we're looking again at one virtual host, and we're saying, okay, this host may have up to, this is a very robust server. It's got 4 processors on it. It may have up to 40 instances on it at one time. Okay, it's probably going to be much lower than that, but it could have up to 40 on weekends or whenever it might be. So what are my options here? Well, and now we're going to be focusing in a little bit more on cost, right? I can assign 4 data center licenses, right, one for each physical processor, or I can assign 10 enterprise licenses, right? Each enterprise license gives me 4 virtual machines, so 10 would give me 40. Now, keeping in mind that they're almost exactly the same price, the 4 data center is obviously going to be a more cost-efficient model for this particular server, and probably this environment in general, when we're talking about live migration. So in our case study here, and we're assuming in this case study, this particular customer, like most customers, does have vMotion enabled. So what did they end up doing? Well, they ended up stepping up. They had 13 Windows Server Enterprise licenses that were under software assurance. So they stepped those up from Enterprise to Data Center. Now, the cost to step up from Enterprise to Data Center is very, very cheap, like 20 or 40 bucks. Of course, you can only step up if you have software assurance on those licenses. But if you do, it's going to be very cost efficient for you to step up and apply data center licenses. In this case, they had to purchase 5 new data center licenses, which gives them a total of 18 data center per processor licenses supporting unlimited virtual instances. Okay, so what does this mean for them? What do they gain from this licensing configuration? Well, first and foremost, the hard dollar savings is going to be about $51,000. So instead of licensing all of these Windows Server Standard, all of these Windows Server Enterprise licenses, and counting licenses, and oh, we have a new one coming online, we have to buy a new license, et cetera, they're going with a data center model so that each of those 7 hosts can accommodate an unlimited number of virtual machines from a licensing perspective. So we're talking about future cost avoidance, right? They can stand up as many virtual servers as they want without spending another penny until they add a new physical host. Right? If they're going to expand and go to an 8th host, then obviously they would have to purchase data center licenses. But until that time, they don't have to buy another license. And also, of course, it scales. As your virtual environment grows, you do not have to count servers. You don't have to worry about, oh, I'm standing up one more, oh, I'm standing up one more, I need to put in a rec for that, or anything like that. Your Windows licensing expenditure is going to remain stable year after year if you're doing SA on that. And those are the main benefits that this particular customer realized through doing this licensing model. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about software assurance here, because unlike with products like Office or Visio or something, applications and things like that, software assurance, we think is particularly important to consider in a virtual environment. Okay, what does software assurance give you? Well, in a nutshell, it's going to give you the rights to future releases. But let's consider if we didn't have software assurance in the environment that we just talked about. Right, so we have 7 hosts. All of them have data center licensing, so they can deploy an unlimited number of servers, but they're stuck at Windows Server 2008 R2. Okay, they can't go beyond that. So what's going to happen? Well, in about 14 months or so, Windows Server 2012 is going to be released. And at some point, you are going to want to stand up a Windows Server 2012 in your environment, in that virtual cluster. So what happens is, basically, because if you're using live motion, again, or vMotion or live migration, because you don't know exactly where that particular server is going to reside at any point in time, the second you stand up that server, all of your licenses are out of compliance. All your data center licenses are out of compliance, in theory, right? So if you want to go to 2012, you really have to buy you'd have to buy essentially 18 new Windows Server data center licenses to begin deploying the new version of Windows Server. Okay. Same thing with client access licenses, just as an aside, right? If you want to stand up a 2012 server, it helps to have software assurance on your the client access licenses so that you don't have to go out and make a monumental purchase before you stand up that first instance in your production environment. So here's a rule of thumb, right? Data center is going to help you scale for future instances. Software assurance is going to help you scale for future versions. And if you do have software assurance, for instance, in this particular environment, we have 7 hosts, right? If we have software assurance on those data center licenses and we have software assurance on our account, what does that mean for this customer? Well, it means, 1, they can deploy any addition of the software that they want, right? They can deploy standard enterprise or data center. Right? B, they can deploy any version of that software, so from 2003, 2000, all the way up to 2012. They don't have to consider the version at all. And C, they can deploy an unlimited number of instances. So they have complete freedom in a situation like that. If you don't have software assurance, you do not have as much freedom, and you're going to have to make expenditures before you make that next upgrade. Okay. So I just wanted to summarize the process a little bit here. And again, the white paper is going to go into this a little bit more in detail, but what are we doing for physical? Right? First, we're saying how many physical hosts. Second, we're saying how many physical processors. For our virtual environment, we're saying how many virtual operating systems total. What are the flavor of those operating systems? And is live migration or vMotion enabled? Host guest allocation. Do we know exactly what VMs will reside on each box at all times? Draw your diagram. All right? Draw it out. And number 4, license accordingly. Okay? So assess what those options are. Remember I was saying, okay, here's what your options are for each box. Price out those options and determine what's the most cost-effective way for you to go. And of course, the white paper is on its way, and it will have much more details on the process itself. Okay? Let's jump forward. Let's talk a little bit about HyperV, and I'm not going to go too in-depth here. I'm not a technician, so I'm not going to talk a lot about the technical aspects of it. A couple things that I want you to know, though. HyperV is a maturing product, right? I don't think VMware tends to be sort of the industry standard, and even Microsoft has acknowledged that. Live migration is becoming more and more mature with every single release that's coming out. For instance, with 2008 R2, we now have live migration, which we've been talking about, right? So now you can do hot migration of an operating system from one box to another without bringing that box down. And then, of course, there's certain other technical advantages, and it just keeps maturing as a product, okay? And number 4, you probably already own HyperV, okay? So it's already included with your Windows Server license, and every single Windows license that we sell here at Softmark includes HyperV. So if you already own the technology, it probably makes sense to check it out, right? And the last thing I really want to leave you with on HyperV is that HyperV is closing the gap, that it probably is something that you should consider. Not now, down the road at some point, because it may help you offset a whole bunch of other technology costs. Okay, I want to touch on System Center a little bit here as well, because this plays into your virtual environment as well, helping you gain control over that environment, over your virtual servers, and helping you manage them. All right, again, we see a lot of confusion about these products. They all do all kind of sound the same, right? They were all something before at some point, right? And they all have weird acronyms. So, first and foremost, let's talk about System Center Configuration Manager. And this is probably the most popular one, and you might know this because it's part of your core count when we're talking about clients. But it also exists for servers. Formerly SMS, right? And what does System Center Configuration Manager do in a nutshell? Pushes out patches and updates, and it gives you asset intelligence, what is deployed. Those are the 2 main things, and that's physical, virtual, mobile, distributed, all of your environments, patches, updates, and gives you asset intelligence. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Next, System Center Operations Manager, aka SCOM, formerly MOM. What does SCOM do? Well, SCOM monitors the health and wellness of your Windows servers, and it also sends you alerts and identifies when there are availability, performance, or configuration problems. Okay. System Center Data Protection Manager, otherwise known as DPM, is your backup and recovery solution. So we're talking about disk, tape, cloud-based backup. We're talking about replication for disaster recovery, and we're talking about bare metal restore. Okay. Again, this is a product that we haven't seen a lot of, but this is a rapidly maturing product, probably something you want to check out in the future. System Center Virtual Machine Manager, otherwise known as VMM. this is going to give you more control over your physical and virtual IT infrastructure. All right, and one thing I want you to keep in mind here, that this is a multi-platform. Okay, this is a cross-platform solution. And lastly, Service Manager. This does IT service management, help desk stuff, problem resolution, change control, asset lifecycle management. So the Service Manager is very, very new. I'll tell you that much, to the System Center line of products, and it's gaining steam. And again, it's a maturing product. Okay, so I hope this demystifies a little bit what each of these products does. Now the good news, if you want all of those products, right, if those products would help you manage your virtual environment, there is a server management suite that's very, very cost efficient. I don't want to say cheap. Cheap's not a good word, but it's really has a low price, and it includes all of those products we just talked about. Okay, so it's going to help you manage your entire data center, from deploying, configuring, virtualizing, what are we talking about? Monitoring, managing all of your backup, your data recovery, your restore, and of course your service manager. It's all included in this one package, right? This is going to help you get closer to that dynamic data center so that you have ultimate control over your resources, and it does it all through a single pane of glass. So instead of having different vendors doing different functions in your environment, you have one vendor, all of the products work together seamlessly, and you're basically seeing everything through what we call a single pane of glass. Now here's the good news. If you want to deploy the System Center Server Management Suite, there's two ways to do it, and as I said, it's really pretty cheap to purchase, right? So if we're talking about an enterprise agreement, level A pricing, then you would pay about $416 per physical processor. That's the Data Center Edition, and that would match up exactly with your Windows Server Data Center licenses. If you had a Data Center model for your Windows servers, you can do a Data Center model for your System Center, and you would be completely covered. Or you can do per box, which is the System Center Management Suite Enterprise, and that's about $4.99 per box, and that's generally if you have up to 4 virtual machines. Now you still would have to purchase the SCOM server itself and the SCCM server itself. Those are like $200 or $300, so that's obviously a minimal cost there. Now, let's take a look at tying this all together. Oop, yeah, got my exclamation mark there. Let's tie it all together through ECI. A new way to save, bundling, right? I hate that commercial. I hate that label. Anyway, but you can purchase these as a bundle called the Enrollment for Core Infrastructure. Okay, this is an enterprise enrollment, so it's kind of like an EA, but it's specifically designed for your data center, and it's specifically designed to give you that clarity and control that you need to achieve a dynamic infrastructure. Right, so it includes your Windows Server, it includes your System Center suite, it includes your forefront protection. Okay, each of these ECI bundles include that. So it's a single SKU, right? You would license it the same way you license your Windows servers, pretty much. This is all per processor, but essentially what we're talking about is a single SKU for your data center environment that includes this bundle of products. Okay, so it's something that this is gaining a lot of popularity, of course, and it's something that we're seeing. It's relatively new. It's about this program is about a year old. But of course it's becoming more and more popular. So I want to summarize because we really covered a lot of ground in this webinar. So I want to summarize just a few things that I want you to take away from this webinar. First and foremost, Microsoft licensing is tough and at times counterintuitive. Now you don't necessarily need me to tell you that, but we acknowledge that, right? We completely understand that. However, we want you to know that there really is a process for uncovering the proper licensing configuration for your virtual environment. Right? We went through that process. So all of those licensing rules and all the product use rights or whatever can be distilled into one simple 4-step process. Number 3, the correct Windows Server licensing model is going to give you greater flexibility and confidence to deploy virtual servers with lowered compliance risks and help you control those costs, right? So we know it's going to help you lower your costs, and we know it's going to help you sleep better at night because you know that you're in compliance. We know that HyperV can help you further lower those licensing costs. Right? The System Center products give you greater control over your physical and virtual machines through a single pane of glass. And finally, that the Enrollment for Core Infrastructure, or ECI, which is this enterprise-level agreement, tie together all of these products to help you achieve a dynamic data center that is secure, adaptable, and efficient. All right, so I think those are really the main takeaways. And I think we're going to, Nancy, I think we're going to kind of wrap up here and open it up for Q&A, if you can help us out there.
Certainly, sir. The question and answer session will be conducted electronically. If you would like to ask a question, please do so by pressing the star key followed by the digit 1 on your touch-tone telephone. If you are using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. Once again, please press star 1, and we'll pause for a moment to assemble the queue.
Okay. One second. We did get a question. Did anybody pop up in the queue? Because
Not at this time, sir.
Okay, we did have a question that popped up. Dana, do you want to tell us what that is?
So we have one question, which is, can you explain the 90-day rule in detail? And then another question was, can you explain the 90-day rule as it relates to the Windows server?
Okay, so the question was, I don't know if you heard Dana well out there, but she's saying, can we explain the 90-day rule a little bit more? And yes. Again, this is one of those that tends to be, tends to be news when we explain this to the customer. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was there. So let's talk about it a little bit. Okay, first of all, let's keep in mind principle number 2, that the license itself is assigned to the hardware and not the virtual machine. Okay, it covers the virtual machine, right? That licensing that's assigned to the box allows you to run that virtual machine, right? It's a license. We're talking about sort of legal terms here, but it does not. That will not transfer to another virtual box within 90 days. Technically, you could, of course you could, but under the terms and conditions of the licensing, Microsoft is saying that you can't legally do that. Now, the exceptions to that would be a hardware failure, so if your server just gets fried and is down, you can transfer that license to another server. So I don't know if that was part of that question, but yes, you can do that. The 90-day rule is waived in the event of a hardware failure. But if we're just talking about migrating virtual machines between hosts, essentially the licenses have to stay where they are. I don't know if whoever asked that question, I don't know, does that clear up your question, or is there any sort of follow-up there? And keep in mind, this only applies to Windows servers. SQL servers are licensed differently. There is no 90-day rule within a server cluster, so you would only license it once, and it can move from server to server. The 90-day rule only applies to Windows servers. Do we have another question?
A question did come into the queue from Joseph Rivecchio from Zwanger Percy Radiology.
Zwanger Percy, yes.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
All right, Jim. So here's my question. We're running VM.
Yep.
Okay. And we have about, I would say, 20 server boards in a, whatchamacallit. My question is this. So if I have 20 physical VM ESX machines, I have to license this per the 20 machines. So is that what I'm getting?
If you have 20 physical ESX hosts,
yes,
they're all part of this one server cluster, and you're using vMotion, right?
Yes.
Then yeah, they would each have to be licensed. Of course, they would have to be licensed. The question is, how would you license them? If you're going with data center, then you're licensing the physical processor, not the box. So you want to determine if they're dual processor boxes or quad processors.
Quad.
Yeah. So what you would need to do is add up the processors on each of those servers, and for any dual processor box, you're going to assign 2 data center licenses to that box. And in
Okay.
cross box, you assign 4 data center licenses.
So I would highly doubt right now that they bought any data server licenses. So you're saying we're out of compliance? Or more than likely are.
Yeah, call Jack Dillman. He'll help you out. He's sitting right here. He'll help you out with that. Possibly. But we'll do a deep dive.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have my contact info, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Chuck and Jack will give you a ring. All right.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Okay, not a problem.
As a reminder, that is star 1 if you would like to ask a question over the phones.
Before we go to the phone questions, we have a couple of questions that are. Now we have 4 questions, and Dana, would you like to and try to speak loudly here?
The question is, what can we do if we do not have SA and want to upgrade to data center?
If you don't have SA and you want to upgrade to data center, unfortunately, you have to purchase those as new licenses. You know, there's really no upgrade path unless you have SA. If you have SA, you can do a step up, but remember, there's no upgrade licenses. I wish I had a better answer for you on that one.
Okay. We have another question. Is there a client requirement for System Center? Do you need a license for every PC it manages?
Yeah, the question was about the System Center and clients. There is. There's client licensing and there's server licensing. It depends on what you want to manage. So there's no client requirement in the sense that if you're managing your data center, you don't have to license any PCs at all. All you need to do is you could get the System Center suite. If you were buying the individual licenses, if you wanted to license those servers individually, you could buy the individual management licenses, and a management license is kind of like a cow for a server. But you're not required to purchase any client licensing unless you're going to be monitoring those workstations. Do we have another one?
We have 3 more.
Okay.
So if you recently purchased several copies of Windows 2008 Server R2 Enterprise, and you realize that you should have purchased Data Center instead, is there a possibility of replacing it within a certain time frame?
Well, I mean, there's technically, yeah. I guess there's a return window. I think there's a 30-day return window, possibly. If there's no SA, there's not a lot you could do outside of returning licenses and purchasing the licenses that you should have purchased. Unfortunately, if we're outside that 30-day window, then you may want to contact your sales rep and see if they can get an exception or something like that. Other than that, there may not be too many good options for you.
Okay, is the Data Center license physical processor or core?
Physical processor. So yeah, anytime we're talking about processor licensing with Microsoft, whether we're talking about SQL processor licensing, Windows Server, System Center, if we're talking about per processor licensing, we're talking about per socket or per processor, not per core. We don't count cores. Unless we get, well, we don't want to get too deep into it, but if you have a very highly virtualized environment and you have SQL, then there's times when you need to count cores. But for this topic, we do not need to worry about cores.
Next was the same question. So
About the cores. And no, you cannot sell your old Windows Server licenses on eBay. I actually get that question all the time. I have all these licenses. Can I sell them? No, unfortunately you can't. Okay. Well, we're coming up on that. Do we have any, Nancy? Do we have any other questions in the queue on the phone?
We do have a couple of questions that have come in the queue. The next one comes from Chris Wikinski.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I sent my question in. It was about not having SA on the server licenses.
Okay. Answered your question?
You already answered it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
And
Thanks,
then we'll go to Bert Stangaroni.
Hi,
Hey, Bert.
hi, how you doing? I think my question was pretty much answered. So we just purchased a Windows 2008 R2 license about 2 weeks ago, and I'm thinking that we might need software. It might be prudent to get software assurance. So you're saying pretty much the only option is to contact my rep and see if we can do like an exchange or something.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, there's not, yeah, aside from that, there's not a lot of good options for you. You cannot add software assurance after a license has been purchased. You can only do that with retail product or OEM licensing. Those are the only two times you can add software assurance after the fact. With
But
license,
those,
go ahead.
don't the OEM products stay with the machine?
Yeah, but if you have OEM licensing, Microsoft does allow you to, within a 90-day window, add software assurance to that license. And what that effectively does is turn that OEM license into a volume license. So now you have full volume license privileges.
I see. Okay. I understand.
Right, and at that point the SA transfers, so you could at that point transfer it to another machine if you wanted to. So,
I see. Okay, thanks.
okay.
And we have no further questions at this time.
Okay, we have one more here through the live meeting.
So Denise asked, can we get the PowerPoint slides emailed to us? So the goal here was to record the presentation, and then we're going to send that out to anyone who attended.
Yeah, we're going to make that available. The PowerPoint is actually a huge, monstrous file, I don't even think I can email it internally here. So we'll make sure that you have access to the presentation itself, and of course you'll have access to the white paper. And if you really do need a copy of the slides themselves, we can probably find a way to get those to you.
I also wanted to mention real quick that we have a copy of our last webinar, Understanding Your Licensing Position, on the homepage of softmart.com. So if you're looking for that, be sure to visit softmart.com. We already have that posted.
Okay, did everybody get that? The webinar we just did a couple months ago is posted on softmart.com. Understanding Your Licensing Position. And that's about it then. We're not sure what our next one's going to be, but we think it may be SQL Server licensing, because SQL Server is an area where, again, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of people out of compliance. So that's probably going to be the next topic we tackle. We'll probably do a webinar and have a detailed white paper to go along with it. So